I do just that. I create community. I help people see who they are first so that they can show up into community in beautiful, bright new ways as their whole self, not as a version that society wants them to be. They get to show up authentically.
We're tired of the rules, tired of the shame, tired of pretending it's all the same. We're tired of the hustle that cuts us in two. We're tired, but we're stronger. We're breaking on through. We're tired as fuck, but we won't back down. We're tired as fuck, still owning this town.
Welcome back to Tired AF. Last week, we talked about how the three of us found each other and built this project. But before we became a we, each of us had our own backstory. The moments, the meltdowns, the awakenings, and the experiences that really shaped who we are. So for the next few episodes, we're each taking the mic to share our own personal origin story. Think of it as how we got this tired and why we're not apologizing for it. And to kick us off in this journey is going to be our fearless architect of this whole thing, Mel Morris. Hi, Mel. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. I'm excited because I think it's really important. We mentioned this in the last episode. I think it's really important for us as women, especially, to talk about our experiences, both good and bad, so that we all can see ourselves in that, right? There are some situations that I've gone through that other people will recognize and maybe are struggling with and need to know, like, yes, there's somebody else in this world who's gone through this before, or even to talk about the amazing shit that we've done, which a lot of us don't talk about that often, including myself. So I also wanted to be like a little cheerleading session for all the amazing things that we've done, and to remind all of you listening, same thing, like celebrate all the amazing shit that you're doing. So yeah, I'm really excited about these episodes.
I love that. And I also think this is a really exciting opportunity. Like I said in the first episode, I want this to be a little bit voyeuristic for folks to be able to see kind of just how we've supported each other. And I love getting to take a step back because we've all come from such different backgrounds and such different experiences. And I think especially in America in 2025, like it's more important than ever to like celebrate those things. And
Absolutely.
so I love that we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell us your origin story, Mel.
So it was a waxing crescent moon in a hot July summer. It actually was a waxing
time
moon
ago.
in July,
Once upon a time.
but I am gonna take us kind of back in time through a little history. The first main kind of plot point I want to bring up is the fact that I'm a mixed race woman. So my mom is white, my father's black, and I was raised in an all white household. So I was raised with my brother and sister whose father was also white. So being a black child in a white household, we grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. Everybody thought I was Hispanic.
Yeah.
And so, lots of intricacies there of what that looked like. I will say that I was never black enough for the black kids. So I never had good friends that were black because I was, too white, or, oh, you think you're better than because you've got that good hair. That was, in the 80s, that was a thing. And so you would see me and this like sea of white kids in high school, because they were the ones who accepted me. And so I still had some bullying from the white kids that accepted me because I didn't have enough. I couldn't go on the field trips. I didn't have like decent clothes. So there was still some of those pieces that happened, but that was the group that most kind of welcomed me in. Over time, I recognized that kind of set up a couple of things within me. So one, I didn't have any like black female friends until I was in my 30s, like literally in my 30s.
Wow.
And I also felt like the only way that my white friends were really going to fully accept me was if I had something to offer, right? Like those were the stories that I told myself because of this experience. But it also set up this interesting idea of inclusion, right? Because I grew up in this very diverse kind of world and space. And I didn't grow up, say, in like in a Black household, in a Black neighborhood where you had that culture around you for better or for worse. It was this kind of mix of everything. And so the idea of inclusion and, race relations and pluralism, before I knew what any of those things were, was kind of ingrained in me. And looking back, again, after doing a lot of work, I could really recognize that's where this idea of focusing kind of on the common good really came from.
That's interesting.
So I mentioned that I grew up really poor. I grew up with a mother who didn't know how to be a parent. I don't have any memories of my mother prior to my grandmother passing when I was 6. We were raised by my grandmother. And then my mom just like appeared into my life when my grandmother passed away. And so she never really had to parent prior to that. And she wasn't necessarily interested in learning how to parent. So parenting was not really part of my history. My father, who wasn't around, he was a gospel singer, church going. And my mother was one of many of his women in his entourage. I can remember actually meeting a brother in my second grade class who was a month younger than me. So like went to school together, all the women knew each other. It was just a thing. It was just a thing.
Wait, how big was the town?
I mean, I'm from upstate New York, from Rochester, New York, or southern Canada, as I like to say, because it's so close to Canada. Yeah. And so I didn't really have parenting role models per se. And growing up, continuing like to go to church, I remember being in church and always having like a lot of questions. Like I never really I never had that leap of faith. Right. And so hindsight, I think that my kind of questioning of Christianity and organized religion, like definitely stemmed pretty early from this space of, okay, here are these Christians who are just living these wild lives and not doing all the things they proclaim. And so I spent a long time like searching for religion and what that meant for me. And none of it really like felt like me. It never really felt comfortable. Again, I never really bought into it. And that definitely continues to carry forward. Now I'm much more spiritual. I, connected to like a pagan family. I am outer court to a Wiccan coven in Florida. And it's less for me about the organized religion or organized group. It's more about learning about the common good that can be gained from being parts of these communities where you are learning about the people and working together with people, and learning about yourself is like the number one kind of value, right?
For you. Because I know how important community is to you, and this like concept of the greater good and plural, all of these, like I know that's like at your core who you are and what you care about. Like I know this because I love you and you're my friend, and hearing more of the details. What I'm struck by, right? Because you talk about like kind of all these different, you weren't fully accepted here, but you're not fully accepted here, and pockets here. And I also know you're a late diagnosed neurodivergent woman. How did loneliness factor in to all of this for you? Because as you're talking about your childhood, that just sounds really lonely. It sounds really lonely. And maybe that is part of what drives your goal of community for other women. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think loneliness is a good word, but I think it's more, I knew what it felt like to not belong in a particular place. I never felt like there was a place where I belonged. And so it definitely, I always tried to create that. I always talk about like my chosen family is my blood is thicker than water. It's a longer phrase that I don't want to quote now. I'll have to look it up. But the full phrase is about community, is about chosen families and chosen communities. being the more important piece to it. Just because you're related to someone doesn't make them the best fit. I think that definitely played a huge part in my life of always trying to create spaces where other people would belong. I remember they used to give us hearing tests in school. Sandra, I don't know if you remember as a Gen Xer.
Oh, yeah.
But like every year you had to do like these hearing tests. And there was a kid in my class who wore a hearing aid that people always made fun of. And I remember trying to fail the hearing test so that he wouldn't be the only person who like got picked on. Now they found me out because like, how do you fail a hearing test? Who knows? But that's always been a thing for me. Like I always want people to feel like, who cares what's happening out there? I got you. I got you here. So yeah, that definitely played a huge part in everything that I've done and continue to do. Yeah, for sure.
That is the most Mel story I've ever heard, that you failed a hearing test so that the one kid with a hearing aid wouldn't be alone.
Especially as an overachiever, failing a test is not part of who I am.
I'm dying on that one.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sandra.
I was just going to kind of prod you in the direction of once you left home, going to college, doing whatever else came next, like, how did you go from like that person who had community at heart to the person who is tired of fuck of everything that has been going on?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's become I'm tired as fuck of the systems, right? Because as a kid, to be thought of differently because of race, because of economic status, that's a systems problem, right?
Totally.
That's not a people problem. That's not, people don't grow up disliking each other because of those things. That's a societal issue. For me, I think even before I knew what that meant, I innately recognized that it wasn't about the people. And so creating spaces for people who were deserving, who wanted to be different, who wanted to have those conversations, didn't want to care about all those things, became much more valuable than me just hating everybody. Again, a part of me did have some resistance. Certainly, again, like I said, I didn't have Black female friends. I had questions about the white friends that I had. I mean, and that's just learned behavior, but by, it was really like, okay, I know everybody doesn't think this way. And the friends that I had closest to me, I felt like, okay, this is all I have the bandwidth for, right? I just like this one person, okay, I'm going to give you all of myself. I don't have the energy to sift through everybody else's bullshit to see if this fits or doesn't fit. So though I'm tired of the systems for sure, continuously, I can see the difference between the systems and the people. So yeah. And I think
skill.
That, a lot of it, all the things that I'll talk about are definitely things that I had to work through, right? Both by myself, just being tired of my own shit and needing to do something differently, and recognizing like you can't navigate these things forever. You have to make some changes. I certainly have gone through therapy, intermittently throughout my life for those times when I just realized like you can't do this shit by yourself. You need to get some more help. And, those two areas are continued, right? I mean, you have to do the work. And I think when people talk about doing shadow work and things like that, it's spending time with yourself and being really critical and curious about who you are and why you are where you are and how do we move forward. And until you can do that, you're going to stay stuck with the same shit you've been stuck with,
I feel like so many people struggle with that, though. I feel like it's something that as a society, like we don't do well and we don't teach our kids how to do.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah. Right? For me, a lot of it was like unpacking so much shame that I had internalized over the years. So I'm curious for you, Mel, how did you navigate through? Like, how did you unpack some of that? Because for me, it was like I had to get through the layers of shame and shit before I could like do that work. And I feel like for a lot of people, there's so much fear and shame that's like so heavy that when they start touching it, it's like it's too much, right? So like, how did How did you navigate that?
Well, one of the other kind of backstory pieces is I'm also experienced sexual abuse as a very young child and did not have support, did not have help as a kid with those things. But when I first started as a trainer, one of the first groups that I was working with was pregnant and parenting teens. So I'm also I was a teen mom as well. And so when I recognized that they needed to have conversations about just what you're saying, their shame, their guilt, their thoughts that they're not enough, I started sharing my experiences as a teen mom, as, someone who has survived sexual abuse and didn't just, it didn't just kill me. And the more that I talked about those things, the more not only did these girls totally open up and, eventually feel inspired to do more, it also helped them and myself deal with those issues of shame and, these stories that we were telling ourselves that, well, now we're not going to be able to do this thing or that thing because of our past, and really just sharing with them like that's bullshit. And so it was really empowering for me to be able to talk about it and to see like, oh, other people needed to hear my story and recognize that there are other people who look successful to me, who are out here, doing the work and showing up. And she seems like a cool person. And I can be that too. And so it really started with talking about those traumas and experiences. And it ended up being cathartic for everybody,
Yeah. You healed yourself in supporting other people. Right.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I'm like, that is the magic, right? Once people name their shadow work, whatever you're calling it, once you can you can't use it against me. You can't make me feel bad about that. That's the ultimate power. And as you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, community and acceptance is the antidote to shame.
Yeah. Absolutely.
12-step programs say that you have to name it to tame it.
Oh,
right?
That's a good one.
There's a whole bunch of these beautiful, pithy sayings that will annoy you, but are also so true. It's amazing. But name it to tame it, right? If you cannot say, I went through this, you cannot heal from it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of what we're doing here right now with our Tired This podcast. We're naming it so that as a community, we can start to tame this mofo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's literally the core, right? For us when we got together of why we wanted to do this. It isn't just because we wanted to talk about stuff I mean, yes, we want to talk about stuff together, but
I want to talk mad shit, but I also want to change the world.
Yes, exactly.
But it's so valuable because a lot of us, I mean, I had to create those spaces years ago. There weren't spaces that I could just find to be a part of and have these conversations. And so I had to create it. I saw the value in it. And so I created it and it was received. And I continued to do that and continue to talk about, traumas that I had experienced and what I did to move on from them, right? It wasn't just yes, I also have this same trauma. It was, yes, I experienced these things and here's what I'm doing about it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? What can you start doing about it? What's a little step that maybe I can help you with or somebody else can help you with, and I continue to have those conversations now at this stage. And that's exactly how I ended up getting both diagnosed with ADHD and having conversations. Just recently, I started EMDR therapy, which has been really interesting. But I didn't recognize that potentially this trauma that I thought I had been dealing with because I'd been talking about it for decades at this point. I've been sharing about it. So in my mind, intellectually, it's like, oh, yeah, you've processed this. But the reality is those things live in your body, right? There's a book, I can't remember the author, but it's The Body Keeps the Score. And it's about the fact that because nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about how trauma affects you long term. It's like, I got out of this abusive relationship. Yay. You think it's over, but it's not, right? Because you still have all of that living in your body and you have to find ways to continuously help you process through those things. I was having a conversation with another girlfriend. We were having brunch, and I'm talking about these sleep issues that I've had nearly my entire life, and nothing I've done, nothing I've tried helps. And she mentioned that a friend of hers was going through EMDR therapy. She had these similar sounding issues, and maybe that's the thing to try. And if I hadn't said anything and she wasn't willing to be friend enough to say, hey, this may be nothing, but here's a suggestion, I wouldn't be going through this now. I wouldn't start to see like, this has been living in my body. You thought you did all this shit, and you did. I mean, I'm not discrediting what I've experienced and processed, but it's still living in there, and it's morphed into other things I couldn't have named myself. And so again, part of the purpose of having these conversations together with community that you build yourself is finding those spaces, those people who are willing to be vulnerable and to give you feedback, and to not just, need to receive all the time, but be willing to say, hey, here's a thought. Hey, here's a thing that might support you. Here's, try these other things out there. So yeah, it's been, community has been so important and continues to be so important in my life because of all those things,
Yeah, 100%.
So why then come to Tired as Fuck? I mean, Mel, the idea of building a community was your idea. You were the one that said this is really at the heart of what we should do. And we all agree. I think that is absolutely the case. But what brought you here? What got you to that place where you recognize that that's the heart of what we're doing, or the heart of what is needed right now?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think just experience. I've had a podcast in the past with some really amazing women. It was wonderful. We talked about moving into a community model. But life happens, right? Those were 3 like super busy women. We're all super busy, and it just didn't fit. Could I create a community by myself? I could, but why? I don't want to just hear myself speak. I don't want to be like, I'm running these things and I'm the guru, come to me and I'm going to tell you all. No, to me, having other voices, having other perspectives is so important. And I think for people who need community, being able to see a group of people versus one person who's telling you about community, well, you're not really walking the walk if you're doing it by yourself. And so when I met Courtney, that wasn't my expectation that anything would grow into a podcast or community or whatever. But as we talked about it and that interest was there, and then she introduced us, Sandra, and we started having these conversations. It's like, yeah, maybe now is the time that this small group can create this larger community and really create this safe space that is so needed. And I mean, why not? Why not build community wherever you are?
And I love that because you are also a reminder of us. This is also, I want to get your thoughts on this, because community is important. We talk about supporting each other and sharing vulnerable things, and we've all done that in different ways, and we'll continue to do that. And a big part of when we talk about community is not just commiserating as community. It's like you said, and here's what I did to move forward, and here's how we're going to change things, right? Because I feel like part of why we wanted to create this space and open ourselves up to other women, especially that are feeling what we're feeling, is that there's just a collective exhaustion right now, and rage and fury and all of the things that are happening. But I think sometimes it can feel so big and overwhelming to actually impact change, right? Because it's like that, it feels so big. It feels like eating an elephant. So like, how do you think about that? Whereas it's a community and we want to support each other and be empathetic and have a place to bitch, but also learn and try to really drive change. How do you think about balancing those things?
I mean, I will say for me, nothing ever feels too big. For me, the challenge is always like, how do I get there? Like I can see the vision. I can see the community. I have already seen it. I don't think it's impossible. I just recognize I haven't flipped the right switches yet to make it all fall into place. because it is all aligned, because it's not difficult. It's not difficult to create community. Once you allow yourself to open yourself up, yes, I will say I've never met a stranger. Like, I open myself immediately to people until you prove me wrong. And then I'm happy to be wrong, and I will cut you the fuck off. But I give myself completely right out of the gate, because it doesn't have to be difficult. When we think about, changing society is difficult, but getting people together to start having those conversations doesn't have to be difficult at all.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't tell ourselves that it is. We can't sit around, and we've spent, as a society, women especially, have spent way too long believing that we are not deserving of more, that we can't do it. Well, look at what's in place. That's bullshit. It is absolutely women who have changed the face of everything, even when power has been stripped away from us. We just have to find other levers to switch to make that magic happen. And the more that we separate ourselves, the more that we, try to be in our own bubbles and try to figure everything out on our own. And, it's up to me to make this thing happen, the harder it is. And the less likely you're going to build that community that's really going to support you. People ask me about, like, well, like, other competitors in your market. There are no other competitors. The only competition that I have in anything in my life, because nobody knows the magic that I can offer better than me. We all collectively have to get to that point where it's like, I have too much amazing shit within me to not be great all the time, to not surround myself with people who acknowledge how great I am, who want to help me be even greater. And we have to just do that. We have to just stop living in our own little bubbles. And again, trying to figure things out on our own, and start showing up for ourselves so that our community can see us, can see that beacon of light, and come in and join us.
Totally.
I love that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Let's see, what else about me? So I am also a gay woman. Quick backstory, I was married many moons ago to a man who was a shitty husband, but, it was the norm, right? It was okay, you've got kids, you're supposed to get married, you're supposed to buy the house, you're supposed to have the family, traditional family, do all the things. Marriage is hard, you got to work through it. I've said those things to people, like, you got to put in the work because, marriage is hard. And well, that's what I thought. That's the best. That was how I got myself through a bad marriage and bad relationships in the past. And I can't just blame him for the marriage not working. It certainly is a two-way street. It certainly took me after the fact to recognize, like, I'm the one who put myself in the situation, who stayed as long as I did, who dealt with as much as I did, who convinced myself, like, I can fix it. I can make it work. I can just work harder to try and I have to take responsibility for those actions, which, again, in the moment felt difficult because it's easy to just be like, this asshole. But, the reality is that there's two people in a marriage, right? And so, it didn't work for a lot of reasons, but it was like anything. Hindsight is 2020. You can look back and say, here were a lot of places I didn't take the off ramp that I could have, but I did. I stayed. And guess what? Now what? Okay. Now what's next? And so when we were going through our split, I used to work with, I met my first girlfriend. And though I always knew I was attracted to women, again, in my mind, I told myself, my friends were just joking about this the other day, women never approached me. And so in my mind, I said, well, I must not really be gay enough if, like, women aren't coming on to me. That was the logic. Because it was always men who approached me, right?
Yeah.
And because that wasn't happening with women, I'm like, oh, it's obviously me. I'm not gay enough. Again, the bullshit we tell ourselves.
Obviously.
Right?
The storytelling, right? The storytelling is
Right.
insane.
Yes.
I was already an adult. I was 29, I think, when I started dating my first girlfriend. I knew then that it wasn't going to be like, oh, I got to sit everyone down and talk about this whole being gay thing. Like, no, Why am I setting it up like it's a problem? When I introduced her as my girlfriend. If you have a question, ask the question. Unwilling to explain it to anybody. Now, I sat down with kids because, it's an adjustment for them. They were young teenagers at the time. But other than that, everyone else just got the introduction, and you do with that what you want to. So after dating a few women, now during that time I assumed, and people wanted to label me as bisexual. Having never lived in the world or had to think about it in that way, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. So it wasn't until after I had dated a few women and, again, didn't work out, obviously, but I realized that even in like the worst relationships with women, I felt more like me. I felt more myself at home in myself with women than I ever did, like in a decent, good relationship with a man. And so those conversations with myself, and I really got to the point where I was like, no, I'm clearly a lesbian. Having sex with men is whatever. I don't want to be in a relationship with men. Like, I can't be me when I'm with men. And so that was like coming out all over again, right? Like having that whole experience of like, no, I wasn't on the fence, you guys. I just didn't know. And so, because there's a lot of flack you get if you're a bisexual person. Like, people want you to pick a side.
Totally.
See my origin story for more.
Yeah. Right. See Sandra's. Yes.
Coming soon to a theater near you.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that has been, and that sparked as well in that first relationship. I started working for actually a LGBT organization that was doing HIV and AIDS service work. And so I really then got to be much more involved in the gay community and learning about labels and how people identify and all of those things, which is a, evolving line for sure. But I didn't have that experience. I didn't have the words to explain who I was or how I felt or any of those things. I had to allow myself that grace of like, yeah, you carried that mantle for a while because other people classified you, but you didn't know. But now you know better. So now you got to be better, And so I've spent the majority of the rest of my life working around still issues of inclusion, but definitely with a hard turn to making sure that LGBTQ rights are kind of at the forefront. And so I ended up working for, like I said, that organization even within that organization, right? It was a male focused, it was a Black male, gay male focused organization, and which, is fine. But we had a lot of women around that needed services, that needed help, that came in and essentially were told like, we don't do that here. And I'm like, okay, but why can't we do more? And so I ended up starting like domestic violence services. And then I got involved like with New York State domestic violence stuff. And how can we be more supportive of our clientele? How can we make sure that all these women who still end up here, even though you don't want to help them, they're still hanging around? How can we do things differently? And so I was able to then start creating programming and offering those kinds of services. And same thing goes back to community. People want help. They want support. And if they're showing up, why are you making it difficult? When I started working at the college, I worked at a private Catholic college in Pennsylvania. And I started that first Department of Diversity, which they did not have a clue of what they were in for.
No.
So they wanted to create this department. They didn't know how to start. I came in and they, kudos to them, gave me free reign to like figure it out and do what we needed to. But the first day that I was on campus, all of these students who had been trying to start a gay straight alliance on campus and had been denied were like, we hear that you are here to do diversity work and we need to tell you about our situation. And so when the announcement came out. So I was married to my wife at that point. Like I said, I had moved to Pennsylvania by then. And when the announcement came out of what I'd be doing, that they were creating this department, and that we would be focusing on not just diversity in terms of race, but LGBT issues. Oh, shit hit the fan. Their alumni were like, we're not giving you money. Like you're,
Oh, God.
ruining our children. And like, it was this whole scandal. Like, you hired this gay woman who's going to taint our kids and make our kids gay. And like, it was a whole dramatic thing. But I'm really proud of the work that I was able to do there. And the students were amazing. And most of the faculty and staff were really amazing and really open to learning more and being more supportive. And that was really the highlight of my career until I went to the ACLU of Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
And they were the ones. So this was pre-marriage equality. So every state back in the day, every state had to fight in their own different ways based on how legislation works in each state for marriage equality separately. So they brought a lawsuit forward. That's how you had to do it in Pennsylvania for marriage equality. And they needed to, as we used to say, change hearts and minds. So I ran the statewide public education campaign for marriage equality in Pennsylvania. And same thing, like community, right? So whether I'm in Philly or Pittsburgh or Erie or anywhere in the middle, it was about getting people together to have the conversation. Why is this a practical matter and not about Christian beliefs? And I'd have people that would take the time to put on clothes, come out, listen to me talk, and then ask me questions like, I don't even know any gay people. Why does this matter? Which people would be offended to hear. But to me, you took the time to come here and respectfully ask me this question and hear the dialogue. You didn't come here protesting or cussing and screaming because you're willing to have a conversation. And that was more meaningful to me. Again, people versus systems. That was so much more meaningful to me that you were willing to do that. And what would happen once the lawsuit was won, the governor could overturn it, right? And so my role in this was, yes, they are doing all the legal pieces, but we're trying to prevent the legislative pieces from getting in the way. Or the governmental pieces from getting in the way. And so after doing all that work, we won the lawsuit, yay. But then everybody was like, shit. But I later found out that the governor's wife actually had come to one of the events, and she had a really good friend who she had been hearing these conversations that people were having, and the hearts and minds that were changing, and was kind of the impetus to tell her husband, like, leave it alone. And so the next day he said he wasn't gonna fight it. And so then, yay, we get to celebrate marriage equality in Pennsylvania. And so then that ended up absolutely being the proudest day of my life, even though my coworkers was like, ooh, girl, you just lost your job. Like, you just win yourself out of your job. But I'm like, how many people can say that they like reach the end point successfully?
Yeah. The fact that this job isn't needed anymore is like, that's the win, bitch.
That's the best outcome.
So that was really wonderful. And now I have my own business. This is what's next. And I do just that. I create community. I help people see who they are first so that they can show up into community in beautiful, bright new ways as their whole self, not as a version that society wants them to be. They get to show up authentically because they know who they are. They know I'm on this path. I may not know how to get there completely, but now I recognize where I'm going, and I can be open to the community that wants to come with me. So that's been really wonderful to be able to do that. And, I focus a lot on intuitive tools. I use tarot and astrology and things like that really help people think outside of the norm definitely outside of the systems, to
Mhm.
really see themselves first and where they want to go. So
I love
that's
that.
some of my story in a nutshell.
Little bit of Mel. Well, before
Little
I take us
sprinkle.
out, I have one last question for you
Yeah.
because I think we've learned a ton about you, and thank you for sharing all of that today. As you think about Mel's legacy
Mm.
and what we're doing here with Tired as Fuck, what kind of legacy do you think you want to leave?
I mean, I'm going to stick with community. If I can look back at a huge, amazing, happy, joyful community of women who are stronger and empowered and have each other and are working towards being the best version of themselves, like that will definitely be my proudest moment.
I love that we're even
Yeah.
maybe rivaling some of the stuff that you shared.
Let's
So
That's
see. Let's
awesome.
see.
that feels like a huge potential win and something for us to work towards. So
Yeah.
thank you again, Mel, for sharing all of that. I think this was a
Yeah.
fabulous way for all of us to get to know you a little bit better. And that wraps up our origin story for today. So thank you again for joining us here at Tired as Fuck. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, your socials, all the things. And if any of this resonated for you, then welcome to the Tired as Fuck slumber party. Come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Thank you.
We're tired as fuck, but we won't back down. We're tired as fuck, still owning this town. We're tired as fuck, together we ride. We're tired as fuck, fire in our eyes. We're tired but stronger, our voices collide. We're tired as fuck with the fire inside.